The movie starts in 1984, when Flight G50 took off from KOL City, Qatar of India. However, mid-flight, the plane began to encounter heavy turbulence and bad weather. Suddenly, communication was lost and the plane disappeared. No trace. From that day on, without any clue about the disappearance of the plane. The film then cuts to 35 years later in 2019. In a remote village where children are playing soccer, suddenly a plane flew over. This is very unusual in such a mountainous area. The children immediately went to the plane and found that it had fallen into the hills near it. The scene then moves to KOL City, Qatar, where the main character, Santanu, is watching the news on TV. The news report mentioned that a commercial plane, Flight AO26, with many people on board missing. It is suspected that the plane was hijacked. Sometime later, Santanu came to his workplace, Central Bureau of Investigation. Turns out you're a senior officer there. He then went to the scene of the accident with colleague Kauranga and start the investigation. Firstly, he approached the rescuers and asked about their progress. The soldier reported that all were dead. There were only 2 survivors in the accident. Those 2 are currently receiving medical attention. One of the survivors was the pilot. The strange thing is, body of a passenger found in the cockpit shows plane was hijacked before crash. After the conversation, 3 people preparing to board the helicopter scene of the accident, but at that moment, the soldier remembered something important. He told the officers that plane crash, not the one they were looking for. It is not Flight AO26, which is actually Flight G50, disappeared 35 years ago. The film then flashes back to the past in 1984, and we are introduced to a female pilot from KOL City, Qatar of India, a person with a high-paying job, a warm family, and a bright future. But for some reason, she has been feeling sad for the past few months. Her mother advised her to cheer up and forget the past, but Baiho ignored it and left to film. Back to present, Baiho is fighting for his life. At the hospital, she was the pilot of Flight JL50. The plane went missing 35 years ago, year 1984. Meanwhile, Santanu and Goranja moved to another village and visit a school. Here they summoned the physics professor, Dr. Das, to interrogate him. The crashed JL50 took off in 1984 and disappear without a trace. There is a drum on that plane, and that ticket belongs to Dr. Das. Mr. Das looked stunned for a moment, but he said he couldn't remember anything because he was old. Memory loss. Dr. Das then returned home and started looking for something. A few minutes later, he collected 11 documents and pictures and burned them. This shows he knows something about the plane crash. Later, a news report about a terrorist organization called ABBA took responsibility for hijacking the flight. 26 demand his release. Their boss is Piethor to ensure safety for passengers. Piethor is expected to be tried in the coming days as well. There is information officials will respond to their requests. A few days after the pilot, Bihu wakes up and Santanu comes to interrogate her. First, he asked her about the cause of the accident. Bihu began to tell the story. Like any other day, the flight takes off at 3 p.m. For the first 10 minutes, everything was fine. But suddenly, a passenger stormed into the cockpit and stabbed the co-pilot to death. Then he gave Cho Baiho the coordinates and threatened her to change course. But before she could do it, sudden deterioration of causing weather, severe turbulence, and quickly met with an accident. After hearing the story, Santanu asked Baiho about location and flight departure date and time, and she replied KOL Qatar, year 1984. As expected, Santanu did not believe her words and thinks she is lying. He emphasized that it is now 2019, and Bihu felt stunned to hear this. To learn more about Bihu, officers visited her old home and questioned nearby neighbors. Because the event happened 35 years ago, so not many people remember her. But luckily, they met a couple close to the Baiho family. The husband. It was revealed that Bihu was a talented pilot, but her career began to decline when she had a relationship with a man. This man got her pregnant before marriage and then died mysteriously. Bihu limit point until her child was born dead. Then they took out a photo album and just gave Santanu the picture of Baiho before she was killed in 1984. Surprisingly, she looks exactly like Baiho in hospital. Despite clear evidence, Santanu, who doesn't believe in time travel, still think everything is staged. Later, he returned to base and listened to the recording of Flight G50 as Baiho mentioned earlier. Several hijackers entered the cockpit and killed the co-pilot. Then, after a while, everything fell silent. Santanu asked his technician the last day the black box recorded data, and he said it was August 1984. This surprised everyone, because the black box is almost indestructible. Therefore, they were forced to believe that the plane had traveled to 2019 time. While the second survivor from the JL50 flight crash, Micha, woke up. When he learned that the crash had another survivor, Micha immediately went to Bihu's room to deal with her. Luckily, a nurse saw him and called for help. However, father controlled the nurse with a knife. In the middle of the hospital corridor, Santanu also comes and tries to calm me down, but he did not listen. Instead, father slowly approached the main door and quickly escaped. Santanu chase, but when you get downstairs, Micha escaped in a car. Santanu was suspicious and immediately started to find out discovered that Micha is a genius, is a professor at the Coal Science Research Center. He is also an activist, related to some terrorist organizations 35 years ago. After finding your address, father, Santanu came to his house. There he saw a large collection of books, documents, and research papers that your father wrote throughout his life. Santanu opened the documents and found a research paper called Projecta. He turned over a few pages and also found the blueprints of the G50 flight. Realized that it is related to the plane crash. He decided to bring this document with him to learn more about Micha and Projecta. Santanu to Science Research Center Kolkata and met a professor. As soon as I heard about the project, the professor told a history lesson. In 253 BC, the Indian emperor gathered scholars, scientists, and philosophers to create 9 different books, teaching of supernatural arts such as invisibility, ability to fly, and time travel. These books was then buried underground, for fear that enemies can use them for other purposes. Several millennia later, some pages of a book about time travel has been found, and a team of 5 researchers has been assembled to prove this theory. This top-secret research program named Projecta, but no results were achieved. After hearing the story, Santanu asks about Micha, but Asuni doesn't know much about Micha. Instead, he suggests Santanu meet Dr. Das, because these two people were very close at that time. Santanu, angry, stormed into Das's house that evening and confronted him before. I bring out the project documents and asked Das to reveal everything. He said that Mitch's father was part of the project, but when no conclusion can be found, the government has stopped the project. Many years later, Mitcha continues to research his father's project, and after working day and night, he finally found the code. Shantanu, do not believe this story and think it is absurd. Das asserts that everything is true. He continued to explain that my father was very smart, studied the incomplete project documents, and find the formula. Through that, discovered a hole in the Earth's atmosphere. Through these holes, time travel is possible. Das also states that he was my father's student at that time, so he knows the whole plan. Micha wants to hijack a plane, take it through the wormhole to another timeline. He is teamed up with Piethor, head of terrorist organization, caused the hijacking of Flight AO-26 at the moment. Das ultimately concluded that he did not board because he was scared. He saw that the experiment would go wrong, and it did. Micha hopes to return in 35 hours, but his calculation was wrong, and the plane disappeared for 35 years. Such mathematical errors are absurd. Despite being so clearly explained, Santanu still refuses to believe anything. However, Das reminds that officials have agreed to release the terrorist leader in the next 2 days. If Micha and Pathor reunite, they can use their knowledge to cause serious damage to the country. There's only one way to stop Micha. He suggested that they should go into the wormhole and go back to the year 1984, where they can stop JL-50 being hijacked. If successful, no one will die, and PA4 and the criminal will never exist. Although still hesitating, Santanu agreed. In the next scene, 2 people came to see Baiho at the hospital. Because you're the only one who knows the coordinates, Santanu asked you to provide information, but Baiho is still in shock for traveling 35 years into the future. After much persuasion, she agreed, but only if she was allowed to fly. Santanu clearly doesn't want to meet her demands, but because this is a top-secret mission, and I had no choice but to agree. The next morning, Goranja secretly arranged a plane. NBA departures. Santanu still thinks everything is a joke. But when they're about to get to the wormhole, everything started to shake. Suddenly the plane crashed, and Baiho was forced to make an emergency landing down an empty field. This area seems completely different compared to the area they just left. Right after that, an old car came and people asked for a ride and got in. After a while, they arrived in the city of Kolkata, and Santanu finally realized that they had actually arrived. Year 1984. The streets, hotels, and everyone is like the 80s. Although Santanu was shocked by this situation, you are still determined to complete your mission. But first, I want to solve a personal problem. At night he goes to an orphanage, and revealed that Santanu had been there as a child. In the year 1984, you wait a while, and suddenly 2 men came by car. Leave the child inside. Santanu rushed inside to check. See if the baby is you from the past. And from a pendant. He confirmed his theory. Whether it's time travel, it can make people suspicious. The coincidence of this time is so bizarre. The next morning, he's with Das and Baiho. Let's start discussing the next step. TW. I've been a friend of Mitch's in the past. to reveal a secret meeting about the hijacking of the JL-50 will take place tonight at a warehouse outside the city. Then the group goes to that location to wait for them to arrive. While in the car, Santano, curious, asks Baiho, "Do you see your premature baby?" "Not with my own eyes." But Baiho has no answer to this. She simply said that after birth, she was unconscious and woke up the next day. Her parents gave her the bad news that the baby had died. Meanwhile, Yuan Pato and the other side to the warehouse, and the meeting began. So BA planners, DOS and Santano will face the wrong hand inside, while Baiho will wait in the car. According to the plan, two people go inside and point their guns at Mitchell and their allies, but they immediately counterattack. It led to a deadly gunfight. Fortunately, Santanu has been trained for this, and take them down one by one. You finally dealt with Piethor, while Dr. Dust treated Micha. When the mission is complete, Santanu takes the suitcase containing the documents and try to burn it. But surprise, DOS pointed a gun at him and threatened him to back off. Everything was a DOS plan from the beginning. Because the original documents burned to ashes in the accident. Precise coordinates, the time travel wormhole is also gone. DOS is not easy to give up. When Santanu approached him for questioning, an idea came to his mind. He decided to use you to travel back in time and steal documents. DOS also revealed the day you escaped from the hospital, he went home and executed you so that no one can stand in the way. You hear this? Two people start shooting at each other and DOS is injured, allowing Santanu to freely destroy documents. Then Santanu and Bihu prepare to leave. But suddenly, all three of them experience severe pain and the sound of pain. It turns out that Micha and his crew were killed. Flight JL-50 was not hijacked, and so three people don't travel to the past. Now the timeline is removing the anomalies, and all three were transported back to the present. However, a small change in the past. It's led to a completely different future. In the last scene, Santano is seen on a plane 26 with his wife, and their planes weren't hijacked. Reality, neither Flight 026 nor JL-50 were hijacked, because the culprit was tried in the year 1984. Santanu and Goranja even met on the plane, but they don't recognize each other. What this means is, you two have never been friends. In this reality, maybe Santanu doesn't even have an officer anymore. Santanu then goes to the orphanage to celebrate my birthday. When you're playing with the child, an old Baiho approaches and hugs him tight. In a shocking development, revealed that Bihu's son did not die after birth. Reality, the child was taken to an orphanage by Bihu's father. Because it was born before Bihu, he was afraid that society would not accept him. That child is none other than Santano. However, in the new timeline, after Flight JL-50 returned safely, Baiho's mother finally told her the truth. The movie ends with Santanu and his mother giving gifts to orphans when you both feel empathy, happy and grateful for their new life. If you like this movie, please subscribe to the channel. Don't miss the latest videos.